All right, and that was Kenny Heatley's report from the federal court a little earlier. Now, for the first time in 2 years, there was no discussion of hiking interest rates in the RBA March board minutes. Well, joining me now for where this is all headed is Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. So great to have you on the set,
Sharri,
Ross.
lovely to be here.
Now, this is significant, but do you think it's a case of Michele Bullock not wanting to fall into the trap of Philip Lowe when he got those predictions wrong? Is she a bit gun-shy now? So we actually don't know where they're headed.
Oh, she's handled this pretty well so far. The media conferences, which the Reserve Bank resisted for a long time, she has come out and suddenly started to communicate a pretty strong message. But what it says is that the Reserve Bank did not even consider raising interest rates. So for the first time, that's giving a clear message. But the question is whether that message is being misinterpreted by the community and by a lot of investors right now. We've got a record stock market. We've got record property prices in most capital cities right now. Now, the reality is that high interest rates are not supposed to produce record prices. They're supposed to do the opposite, to actually push demand down. But at the moment, you've got very strong demand. And this is one of the reasons why now it's suggested the Reserve Bank for a long period of time may do nothing. So the first interest rate cut that most people are expecting in September this year, and maybe 3 cuts from then on, maybe the first cut doesn't come until well into next year. And really, that's because the interest rate rises that we've seen haven't had the effect of genuinely quelling demand in our community.
I mean, while we have had a lot of interest rate rises, and no question, they've absolutely hurt people. They've caused pain because people took mortgages out on the assumption that they weren't going to rise. But interest rates are still at historic lows anyway, aren't they?
Close to historic lows, that's right. So despite all of the interest rate rises, they're well below their long-term average. And the second thing also to bear in mind is that while most people have had jobs, and remember that last month the unemployment rate fell, it didn't rise as expected. So that means that really people are able to cope. The real crisis happens always when people don't have a job. And that way, they've got nowhere to turn. And that's when really people start going to the banks and going broke, foreclosing on mortgages. Yeah. And that's when you suddenly start to see property prices fall really aggressively. That's not happening.
I mean, even the RBA was predicting that employment was going to rise. I mean, Michele Bullock said that herself in a speech late last year, and we haven't seen that. You know, it went up a little bit to 4%, came back down to 3.7%. So it has held up remarkably well.
Which is great news, right? Yeah. Great news, because if people have got jobs, guess what? They can pay their bills. Even though they might be struggling, they can pay their bills. If they don't have a job, they can't pay their bills. Second thing is, for the government, it is brilliant. So remember that we are dragging in so many more migrants now. So net migration last year up by 580,000. The total population last year up by close to 700,000 people. Think about that in 1 year. But the fact of the matter is, most of those people, adults, found jobs. And that means the government collects more than half of its revenue on an annual basis from PAYG taxpayers. So that means if there's more people out there working, guess what? The government gets more money, which is the reason why, if it doesn't get there, it's going to be very close to producing its second successive budget surplus.
Well, exactly. I mean, the high immigration levels are basically partly why we've managed to avoid recession, although we have had that per capita recession.
But it does cause problems for the housing market.
Yes, for housing supply. Well, let's have a look at that, because new stats out just today from the ABS on population growth for Australia.
Yes. Now, this is going to frighten a few people, I will tell you.
Yes, tell me.
So I'm going to show you the scenarios they've got. They've gone out 50 years with different scenarios as to where Australia's population could be. So right now, Australia's population, give or take, is 27 million people. But that means our big capital cities, Melbourne and Sydney, getting out towards 4.5 million people. And we know the pressures that's causing on housing and also infrastructure. So if we have a look at the chart, you'll see the first one basically shows us exactly where it is. Now, 4 lines here, 4 scenarios. The one at the bottom says no new net migration. And if that's the case, we're just relying really on our natural births and deaths for our population.
That's if Pauline Hanson's the Prime Minister.
Right, yeah. So as a result, the population falls over time. That's not good for any economy. Yeah, our economy would go backwards. The second one from the top is basically where the Reserve Bank and others presume Australia's population will be. But the top one, which is broadly where you start to see Australia's population get out beyond 40 million people over that period of time. So this is a lifetime of many people who are watching now.
Is that around 46 million?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's getting out 35, 40, even to 45 million people. So consider
in the
that
next 50
during the
years.
lifetime of your children as they get to about your age.
That's
so
a
it's
terrifying
really astonishing.
thought.
So, but if you think about
if
that,
housing is hard enough to get into the housing market for young people as it is, if you're competing with
so if we're talking
what
40,
percentage is that? Another 30% more people?
Well, it's not quite a doubling, but almost a doubling of that. It's about 80% more people on what we've got now.
We've got around 26 million.
27 million, 26 million people now. But think about this. If we've got 45 million, so at the moment we've got, say, 27 million, 4.5 in Melbourne, 4.5. So a third of our population lives in Melbourne and Sydney. If a third of our population live in Melbourne and Sydney, and we've got a population of close to 45 million, that means 7.5 million people in Melbourne and in Sydney.
Oh my
so the best part of 3 million more, the doubling almost of the population in that period of time.
Please, no, Ross, can we not have... I mean, the thing is, Prime Ministers in the past have been very open about wanting a big Australia. But Albanese, like in so many other policy areas, he never took a big Australia to the election. He never told the public about this. And then suddenly, he gets into office and Labor has just had this big Australia policy, 500,000 more people
this is about propping up Australia's economy.
But without telling people that that's what they were going to do.
But propping up and also playing catch up, they would claim, from COVID. So that's their claim, right? But the reality is that Australia's population is growing at the fastest rate it has since the post-war era in percentage terms. So this, of course, is also putting enormous pressure, not just on the housing market, but on infrastructure as well. And if we consider even the problem of the housing market is there's not enough workers. So the prices of building is going up. People don't build because they can't make a profit. And where are the workers? The workers are building infrastructure projects that Australia is also playing catch up on from the past 15 years or so. So it's almost a vicious cycle for this country at the moment that government is not going to easily solve.
No, and also not for now because we're out of time, but the conversation does also need to be had about where the migrants are coming from and how we want the makeup of our country.
Well, there's no doubt about that. That is absolutely key, and youth is the key. There's no doubt. Youth and skills are the absolute key.
Right, we're out of time. Ross Greenwood, it's so much fun having you in studio today.